Is it really that easy to get fired at an American company? For some context, I'm in Korea. It's extremely hard to fire someone here unless 1, they did something obviously bad, illegal, or 2, the company's survival is at stake and they can actually prove that unless they lay people off, they'll go out of business. When I read or hear stories online or from friends' acquaintances, it seems like the smallest mistake or even talking back to your manager is enough to get you fired. Some of my friends have also claimed that the high American salary is sometimes not worth the unstable employment status. As someone who would like to eventually work in the US, this is a little concerning to me. How true is this? Many states are at will employment. The employer can fire an employee for any reason at any time. And an employee can quit for any reason at any time. There are reasons that it is illegal to fire someone, although companies sometimes still do it. It is that easy, but most people aren't firing folks over nothing all the time is what it comes down to. People need workers and they need people who are trained. That said, some places are revolving doors. Some places have folks 20 years in. It's really all over the place and depends on the people and workplace culture. I received a top performance rating, and the next day was laid off. In the US, they can terminate your employment without a reason. Work for the government, you almost will never be fired and the benefits are great. You gotta think how majority of big companies at Korea hire versus here. I am also Korean. And I know where you are coming here in the US. Companies hire anytime. Well, as long as they are not on a hiring freeze. Whereas many of big Korean companies has certain period of time they hire. But yes, anyone can fire and can be fired anytime. Yes. It's that easy. There are a handful of protections. You can't be fired because of your race. You can't be fired because you're pregnant. You can't be fired because you're over the age of 40. And so on. If you plan to come on a visa, be aware that for most employment visas you only have 90 days to find a new job if you lose your old one or you will be deported. You have a solid chance getting laid off if the C-suite fears a possible recession or if shareholders complain enough to them about the company not earning as much profit as previous years. Frankly, those seem like the most common reasons to me. You'll hear shit like reduction in force or reorg during situations like that. Dude, just because we have at-will employment in America doesn't mean regular people get fired left and right all the time. Sure, layoffs happen, but it's not regular occurrence and the extreme majority of people don't need to wake up each day in fear of randomly losing their jobs. It varies. If you're fixated on FAANG or something, it'll be more competitive and those companies are very aware that they have lines of talent tripping over themselves to get in. If you're looking at a startup, it'll be risky as well. If you're targeting larger companies that are a little more boring, e.g. your big insurance bank companies, they tend to be a lot safer and more conservative because they have huge HR departments that are very risk-averse. Don't be too freaked out about the risks. But don't be a sucker and only target the hottest of the hot companies. Better study hard because work is all about exploitation here. If you even show the smallest amount of ignorance, they will try to screw you over. However easy you've heard it is, it's even easier. I've never been fired for being argumentative. But I've been dressed down for it. But it's very common to be fired for restructuring. Companies are constantly bought and sold. And if your company is being sold, everyone is a potential target for termination. I literally just got fired for reading your post, so yes. To put it into perspective, in the past both Netflix and GE had policies where they would rank their employees and fire the bottom 10 every single year, even when the companies were growing in size, as a way to ensure only the star performers stayed at the company. It's hard to imagine something like that happening in another country. That doesn't make a ton of sense, but theoretically true. Suppose I was working with someone, and they just made the smallest mistake. They thus got fired. I'm immediately looking for a way out. Also, haven't heard of firings for talking back to their managers yet. Both of those seem atypical. Yeah. At the drop of the hat basically. Professional type jobs at big companies have severance usually. But most jobs just ask you to leave. My boss got fired because someone else had a one-on-one with his boss and that person pointed out our team would make more sense under a different vertical. 3 weeks later he was out. I've been fired once and laid off once. Yep, pretty easy. America is a nightmare. You have to pay everything. Get debts before you even start working just to study. You can be fired for everything. That's awful. In Italy, even if the company is in a severe default risk and fire someone, the government will ask you why, and if you can't convince them, it will be a bloodbath for you, the company. Check this out, and you will see how easy and mass-scale layoff can happen in US companies. Yes. It depends on the company, your team, and what state in the US. Getting easily fired for things like making small mistakes or talking back to your managers is common in high turnover industries such as food service and healthcare. In corporate environments, from my perspective, I usually don't hear a lot of people getting fired unless they did some misconduct. I got fired for failure to communicate issues to my manager, who had a history of responding to similar communications with statements like, well, can't we just? Where was usually SMTH that we very much could not do upside down face. I chose to quit communicating those issues up because 1. His responses made me feel incompetent. 2. Doing so was never useful, and thus our conversations would go from productive to him badgering me with questions that I needed time to think about and expecting an immediate answer. It's a goddamn war zone over here. Every man is fighting for himself. That said, I think the USA would be a far better place if you couldn't just fire people without any warning. You can be fired for any reason, except a few very specific protected ones, e.g. race. So yes, very easy. Technically yay, logistically no. Laid off can happen at the drop of a hat, but it's really hard to get fired. Legally yes. It's very easy to fire someone. Practically, it depends on the employer. Some are so bureaucratic that it's very difficult to fire anyone. Others will fire you on a whim just for the slightest mistake. Or even just disagreeing with an exec. Yes. And it's honestly destroying the American work ethic and morale. Yes. It's true that you can be fired at any time. For any reason or no reason. No. It's not an issue for talented software engineers. It seems like the smallest mistake or even talking back to your manager is enough to get you fired. X200B. The reality is not like this at all. It is expensive AF to hire someone and onboard them properly, so people don't get fired unless the company has a financial reason to. They consistently underperform for a long period or they fuck up pretty badly.